Hello everyone, today I bring you a very interesting manhwa. I hope you like it. Now let's go to the video. The story begins by stating that the barbarians are born as warriors and belong to a clan that considers it an honor to end their lives on the battlefield. Among these warriors was an individual who was the father of our protagonist. Even in the worst possible situation, even after being betrayed by the tribe, he fought to the end for his family and his honor. The scene soon focuses on his own friends, striking him with multiple spears as he protected his family. His mother held him tightly as he struggled, watching his father being torn apart alive. His mother took her necklace with a bright blue crystal, and while holding her son, she broke the crystal, making a beam of light fall upon him, lifting him up. Crying, she said her final words before he left. She said goodbye to him, and his father, still standing, shouted for his son Aiden to become strong. Strong enough not to lose anything, so strong that no one could touch him, and of course, to make sure he survived. Crying, Aiden replied that he understood, and in his father's eyes, which faced death, there was neither regret nor fear, only pride in being a barbarian. The scene shifts to a more modern place, in present day. A background character, with a cigarette in hand, is bullying a young boy with glasses. The bully demands the boy's backpack and valuables. This background character is Kim Jin-tae, a third-year student at the school. Kim, on his knees, pleads with them not to do this to him, as it could cause headaches later. The bully mocks Kim, warning him that he'll have a headache, to which Kim replies again, mentioning that his friend is arriving soon. The bully seems unfazed by Kim's warning and raises his hand to hit the defenseless boy on his knees. But just as the slap is about to land, something hits the bully faster, throwing him against the wall with such force that it breaks the wall he hit. The other boys with the bully are stunned by what happened and look to see who dealt this blow to their friend with just one punch. This young man, known as Gionil, but actually Aiden, though apparently his name in this world is Gionil, calls the background character rude. Shocked by his strength, they ask who he is. Gionil grabs one of them by the collar and states he is a friend of Kim Jin-tae, the one they were bullying. Then he punches the boy. The scene shifts to the two walking away together, with Kim praising Gionil for breaking through a wall with a punch and asking if he's human. Surprised, Gionil stammers out a suspicious, "Yes, I'm human." It's been 10 years since the events in the world of the barbarians, where Aiden arrived on planet Earth. Even his friend Jin-tae, suspicious of Aiden's strength, wonders about him as they continue walking. The scene changes to Aiden and an elderly man sitting and eating. The old man asks why Aiden is eating less than usual and if he's feeling well. With a mouthful, Aiden says he's not eating much because he has no appetite, then asks the man why he isn't eating. The old man replies that he's old and doesn't digest well, but he's satisfied just watching Aiden eat. Aiden notes that he says this every time, and he thinks to himself how grateful he is to this old man, whom he respectfully calls grandfather, the one who took him in, a young barbarian boy with nowhere to go, and raised him without asking anything in return. The old man tells Aiden he got a call from Manager Park, asking if Aiden had mentioned wanting to become a boxer. Aiden responds that he doesn't intend to become an athlete, leaving the old man surprised by his decision. The man asks why and reminds him that he has won every boxing award. So wouldn't it be a waste? In his thoughts, Aiden considers it unavoidable because he's a barbarian, and humans are a completely different species. Competing in common sports would be like cheating, which he believes goes against the spirit of fair play. He mentally apologizes to his grandfather, knowing that as a barbarian there's only one path for him, and that path is not in common sports, but in bloody battles with worthy opponents. However, there's a problem for a barbarian lineage like Aiden's in this world, as it's very peaceful. Sitting outside the house, he notices the old man watching TV inside. With a disappointed tone, the old man asks, "What's going on with all this chaos?" On TV, a report informs viewers that the government is conducting a full investigation into an unidentified disaster in Cheongju. The old man's words and the news catch Aiden's attention, and he enters the room, asking what's happening. The old man explains that the news said there was an incident in Cheongju with over 120 victims and something about monsters appearing. With concern, he comments that it must really be the end of times. Aiden feels confused by the word monster. The news report resumes, with the reporter stating that new footage has been released and that unidentified life forms were also spotted in the Eastray area, so caution is advised. Guys, I took a break from the manhwa to say that if you like the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. But 90% of those who watch the video don't subscribe, so I'm counting on your help. Now let's go back to the manhwa. Seeing the monster on the screen, Aiden begins to tremble. Noticing his reaction, the old man suggests that he sit down as he seems too nervous. The old man feels slightly puzzled by Aiden's reaction, while Aiden, now serious, tells the old man that he's going to go out for a while. The scene shifts again to Aiden in Kim's car. He had asked his friend for a ride. Kim tells Aiden that this will be the last time he gives him a ride, as now Aiden needs to get his license. Soon, Aiden thanks him for the ride and for coming, and immersed in his thoughts, he recalls the monster he saw on the television screen, which reminds him of his childhood in the world of barbarians. He wonders if perhaps that creature could be connected to the world in which he once lived. However, soon after, Kim drives them near a tunnel where a large crowd of people and vehicles create a massive traffic jam at the entrance. Aiden exits the vehicle, stating that, as he thought, something is happening here. Kim also steps out, explaining that he heard a disaster occurred here. The atmosphere becomes intense, with even soldiers present. Aiden agrees, saying that this does seem to be the place of a tragedy. While they're talking, an older man approaches, complimenting Aiden's physique. He says that based on Aiden's outfit, it seems he doesn't yet belong to any group, then hands Aiden a golden card, adding, "If you're interested, you can join our group." Aiden takes the card, wondering if this group might be a guild where warriors gather. The older man, with a hint of irony, says that Aiden has a sense of humor despite his serious face, and adds that they need to colonize planets. They are more like workers than warriors. He then invites Aiden to join their group, assuring him he won't regret it. Aiden looks at the card and apologizes to the man, saying he won't accept because he is a warrior, and being a worker would be a dishonor for him. The man in the vest doesn't seem pleased by Aiden's words, quickly becoming furious and calling Aiden a disgrace. He exclaims that Aiden is just a lazy warrior, talking nonsense about being a warrior when he's actually being given a great opportunity to change his life. Aiden, equally furious and clenching his fists, retorts, "Nonsense? Are you insulting warriors?" Before the tension escalates further, a purple light emerges from the tunnel. Suddenly, all the citizens present are armed, and one of them shouts for everyone to prepare. Kim, shocked by what he sees, asks, "What the hell is that?" From the purple-tinted tunnel, a black sphere emerges, displaying a message. "The judgment of the apocalypse has begun. The end of the world approaches." The sphere continues. "Planet Sanctuary, Nova extends a hand to the inhabitants of Earth." Aiden is surprised by the apocalyptic message. The floating sphere gathers energy, and in an instant fires a purple energy beam toward the ground, causing destruction wherever it lands. Just as it's about to hit Aiden, a blinding light envelops him. In this great white light, a smaller information window appears, with the message, "Escape to Nova through the portal." Aiden is startled by the situation, but realizes he wasn't harmed by the purple beam. Rather, it seems they were teleported to a completely different place from where they were. Aiden remains calm, but Kim is utterly frantic, blaming Aiden for their predicament. He worries about his car, wondering where it might be, and, while he laments in frustration, an information window appears before him, surprising him. The window states, "Objective: obtain 1 goblin coin. Reward: beginner class advancement." He wonders what this end trial is. Aiden then tells Kim to look at something, and in front of them appear several supposed goblins, leaving Kim confused as he asks, "What are these creatures?" Frightened, He asks if it's true they have to capture these monsters. Despite Kim's fear, Aiden doesn't waste any time and charges at the goblins barehanded, with a huge smile full of excitement on his face. He begins to massacre the goblins, thrilled as he thinks about how long he has waited for this, finally able to confirm his strength. With each blow, his blood boils, and he becomes insanely excited. His barbarian instincts tell him that it doesn't matter if it's the apocalypse or anything else, it can come. With fists as hard as steel, he tears through the goblins wildly, even surprising his friend Kim, and defeats 3 monsters in the blink of an eye, using only his bare hands. The goblins, faces crushed against the ground, begin to glow blue and disappear slowly. From one goblin, a small golden glimmer appears, which reveals itself as a large goblin coin. This coin is a basic Nova coin, exclusive to the End Times trial and non-transferable. Aiden, surprised by the coin, realizes it's the goblin coin mentioned in the status window earlier. As he holds the coin, it disappears in his hand, and another status window appears, informing him that he has earned the right to become a citizen of Nova, and instructing him to pass through the portal to enter Nova. Kim asks, "Pass through the portal? What does that mean?" Aiden suggests it might be that thing floating over there. The scene shifts to Kim, face swollen and clutching a piece of wood, complaining to Aiden, asking why he threw him into a place full of goblins out of nowhere and whether Aiden is trying to kill him. The status window soon indicates that the coins are non-transferable, so he has to earn his own by himself. Yet, Kim keeps complaining, saying that sending someone like him, who doesn't even know how to fight to a place like this, is unfair. But as he's distracted, another goblin decides to get up and attack him, yet Aiden counters it as if it were nothing, landing a downward kick on the goblin, killing it instantly. Smiling, he tells Kim that he won't let him die, concluding that Kim got into this mess because of him, so he has to take responsibility and help him. Even with a swollen face, Kim says that at least they completed the mission, and that alone is a relief. The scene then shifts to binoculars, soldiers observing them, looking at their supply bag, probably stolen by the goblins. The soldiers prepare to kill them as the scene returns to Aiden and Kim. Aiden is rummaging through the bag the goblins stole from the soldiers, saying there was a lot they were carrying, so now they wouldn't need to worry, as they have military rations and won't need to worry about food for a while. Just as he's thinking of eating something and continuing the journey, a soldier points a rifle at Aiden's face, thinking he's a goblin, yelling, "Die, you damn goblin!" But he soon realizes they're humans. When the tension eases, the scene shows some food frying in a pan where a soldier says they were surprised to see people there. He then asks if it's just the 2 of them and if they're completely unarmed. Kim explains that they ended up there without knowing what kind of place it is, and asks, "By the way, are the soldiers also participating in this end of days exam? If so, then everything in the status window must be true." The soldier, in a serious tone, confirms this, explaining that the government is also preparing for the end of days. The planet Nova, where humans will migrate, is practically in the Stone Age, so they need to work together to build villages. Visionary companies and organizations are also investing in Nova's development to prepare for the new era. An unknown competition for the public has already begun behind the scenes. Intrigued, Aiden asks, "And on Nova, are there many monsters like the ones we've seen before?" The soldier replies that this place is a kind of testing field, while Nova is the main stage, so to speak, and that's why it's crucial to train here, as it will be even more challenging on Nova. Taking a supply bag, he says, "Here, take this travel bag. We have plenty of other supplies. There should be enough food and weapons." Kim feels grateful for them, while Aiden grows pensive, realizing that Nova will be even harder than this place. This thought excites him even more, as he's thrilled to continue his hunt. They soon walk through bushes, with Kim continuing to complain if they could at least continue resting before hunting. Aiden firmly states no, that after hearing what the soldiers said, they can't stay still, and he insists they need to level up faster. Further ahead, they see a tower with what seems to be a goblin shaman casting a spell, with a large purple light floating above him, and guards stationed at the base of the tower, alerting Kim, who wonders if it's just a regular goblin. Aiden explains that he came there because he heard a strange sound, while Kim warns him that it seems dangerous. Aiden, however, has other plans and charges at the goblins with a frying pan he used earlier. The goblins, seeing Aiden, go on alert, but Aiden, with his strength and frying pan speed, hits them as if he were a mother scolding her children with a slipper. After finishing off the goblins at the tower base, he begins climbing the tower where the goblin shaman is. Holding his staff, the shaman quickly casts a purple lightning bolt toward Aiden, surprising him just before impact. Despite being hit with a terrifying face and a burned body, Aiden shows excitement and enthusiasm for a good fight, surprising the goblin shaman, who casts another purple lightning bolt. But despite being struck multiple times, Aiden keeps smiling, asking the shaman to hit him more, showing immense enthusiasm as if electricity surged through his spine. In his thoughts, he declares he's not just the son of any barbarian, but of a great shaman. With his body glowing gold from all the lightning strikes, Aiden still jumps toward the goblin with his enhanced frying pan, hitting so hard that he even breaks the tower. Aiden falls from the top of the tower with a burned yet smiling body. While on the ground, he says it was close, and that he survived thanks to the magical resistance inherited from his mother. Then the goblin's coins drop, along with a golden orb, surprising Aiden as a status window appears. Mana Orb grants a permanent small amount of mana, activated with 10 goblin coins, exclusive to the end of days exam, non-transferable item. Holding the orb in his hand, he thinks that he could gain mana like a shaman, and the orb enters his body, making him shine and feel an incredible sensation, as if he gained so much power that it made his previous efforts seem worthless. Kim rushes towards him in worry, asking how he's okay after being struck by lightning, and if he's even human. Aiden calls Kim's name. Concerned, Kim asks if he's injured or something, but looking at Aiden with a scary expression, Aiden asserts they must hunt even more. Kim, utterly shocked by this idea, watches as Aiden declares it's time to find the next hunting field quickly, especially those blasted goblin shamans casting lightning. Kim, clearly not thrilled with the idea, shouts for him to stop. The next day, with the tent set up, Kim asks if Aiden hunted goblins all night without sleep. Aiden, holding orbs of various colors, excitedly shouts and shows him, saying, "Look, I got strength, perception, and mana orbs." Thrilled, he can't wait to test this power, and clenching his fists, exclaims that it feels like he got stronger in just one day. Kim calls him a complete madman. Soon, the status window appears, warning that 12 hours have passed in the end of day's exam, and field bosses are now appearing in the exam area. The system hints that bosses are formidable foes that novice players can't handle and advises escaping as soon as possible. Fearful, Kim exclaims, "Damn, now bosses are appearing?" This is madness, and tells Aiden to run with him to the portal immediately. Aiden, however, has other plans. The scene focuses on his face, fully excited, as Kim calls him a lunatic. The scene shows soldiers firing at an ogre boss, aiming for its club, but the bullets seem useless as the ogre tries to strike the soldiers. However, before it hits them, Aiden arrives, landing a punch against the ogre's club, breaking it in half, shocking the soldiers as they recognize it's the same guy from before. Aiden, finding the fight thrilling because his opponent is bigger than him, then shouts for everyone around to back off as the ogre monster is his. Soon, excited, Aiden strikes at the ogre, but the ogre blocks Aiden's brute force attack. Aiden quickly realizes it feels like he's hitting steel instead of flesh. After defending himself, the ogre strikes back, hitting Aiden and throwing him far away, leaving Kim surprised that this creature is overpowering Aiden. The soldier notes that one would need to be a tank just to stand a chance against the ogre. Aiden, on the ground, thinks that this ogre has immense destructive power and is undoubtedly stronger than he is. The ogre then approaches, delivering another blow with Aiden on the ground, but Aiden dodges and switches strategies, deciding to avoid direct confrontations. Quickly, the ogre starts delivering one attack after another, with Aiden skillfully dodging backward using excellent footwork. Seeing these simple attacks from the ogre are easy to read, he decides to use the ogre's own weight against him, applying a technique on the ogre and flipping him upside down onto the ground. This gives him an excellent opportunity to strike the ogre's face, and he lands a punch strong enough to break the ogre's teeth. However, one punch isn't enough, so he begins landing successive blows on the fallen ogre's face, leaving the soldiers astonished, as Aiden is defeating an ogre with his bare hands. With the ogre completely beaten and lying on the ground, his face swollen, Aiden celebrates, having defeated someone stronger than him. He then declares that anyone else can come if they want. Meanwhile, the ogre, lying on the ground, cries from the beating he has just suffered. His body turns blue and disappears, leaving behind a dark orb this time. Curious, Aiden wonders what ability the orb will grant him. Near the portal, the soldiers thank Aiden for saving them from the ogre. However, Aiden says it was nothing. He simply wanted a fight. A soldier suggests that before moving on to Nova, he should buy as many items as possible from the store, and he reminds Aiden that he can't take anything that wasn't bought there. Meanwhile, the goblin at the front of the store with his cigar invites them to check out the shop. They're surprised that the goblin can talk, and the soldiers enter the portal as they have a report to make. After leaving the store and entering the portal, the status window appears, welcoming them to Nova. Kim is thrilled to visit another planet, and upon their arrival, he points to the sky, showing Aiden the two moons. This is the planet Nova. From a cliff, they can see many people gathered below in combat. Kim suggests they join the gathering, but Aiden, serious, mentions a problem before they go. Kim asks what it is, and Aiden, with a pained expression, says he's starving. Surprised, Kim thinks that's bad. Aiden turns into a beast when he's hungry. It'll take them at least half a day on foot to reach the tent village. While they talk, a woman arrives and asks if they just arrived and if they need any help. Kim immediately thinks she's cute, but asks if she's a survivor and if there's a place they can find food, as they just arrived and have nothing to eat. The girl with a finger on her lips says they don't seem empty-handed, but quickly brushes it off, saying it's fine and they should follow her since, in these hard times, people need to help each other. She mentions there's a good place to find ingredients. They follow her excitedly and soon arrive at a small lake, where she mentions that she found this spot for catching good fish. Kim, placing his item bag on the ground, says it's a great opportunity to catch some fish with the various fishing rods they've acquired. The woman turns and encourages them to go ahead and fish, while she retrieves some bait nearby. They agree, and as they prepare their fishing rods, they comment that she seems like a nice person. While Kim fishes, Aiden is in the background, dying of hunger, but Kim tells him to calm down because soon he'll catch something. Kim's status window informs him that by assembling the fishing rod, he's unlocked the crafting skill. He's happy with his new skill, but Aiden, unable to withstand his hunger, jumps into the lake to try catching fish with his bare hands. Kim calls him a lunatic again, realizing that hunger drives him crazy. As he's at the lake's edge, some figures appear, wondering why he's alone there. The girl also joins them, and Kim asks if these people are her friends. The girl, with a tone of mockery and disdain, says, "Look at this. This fool really fell for it," leaving Kim stunned by her change in demeanor. A figure with black hair states that on Nova, if you walk around alone showing you have items, you're asking to be robbed. As the figures hold Kim down, immobilizing him, he questions why she deceived him. The girl replies that she didn't deceive them. It's simply the law of nature. The weak get devoured. She gets straight to the point, demanding that he hand over everything he has. However, Kim, still defiant, declares that if they keep messing with him, they'll seriously regret it. The black-haired figure slaps Kim across the face and then asks the girl where the big guy who was with him went. Another figure speculates that he might have run away, but from the lake, Aiden emerges with a crocodile on his head and another in his hands, confusing the attackers. They say he might be getting eaten by crocodiles, but Aiden, in his thoughts while struggling with the crocodiles, thinks his new skill is amazing. The orb gave him an ogre skill option, and even as the crocodiles bite him, he remains unscathed. He feels like he hit the jackpot with this attribute, having chosen the ogre skin skill, which is as tough as steel. Emerging from the lake with the crocodiles in his arms, he asks who these people are, as he only gathered enough meat for 2. Kim takes the opportunity to ask Aiden for help, explaining that the woman deceived them, but Aiden dismisses it, saying he's going to eat the crocodiles quickly and asking if Kim has a problem with that. Kim shouts that they slapped him in the face, and one of the attackers remarks that Aiden seems like a real fighter. Although the attackers try to appear confident, seeing they're outnumbered, the orange-haired figure doesn't get to finish his thought before being struck by one of the crocodiles Aiden is holding. With a deadly seriousness, Aiden warns them that he doesn't resolve problems. He eliminates them. The scene shows the extras held on their knees, with swollen faces after taking a beating from Aiden. Aiden then asks if they are henchmen of a faction called Dragon Turtle. The extra with black hair confirms, and Aiden asks if he is the leader, but the extra denies it, revealing their boss's name is John Yong-gu, claiming he is the strongest of this era. A girl immediately retorts that their boss will finish Aiden, and adds that he is incredibly powerful thanks to the status stones he extorted. Aiden, unimpressed by their threats, continues eating his crocodile and hints that their boss sounds rather troublesome. Watching Aiden eat the crocodile with just his teeth, the extras are taken aback. Aiden throws a piece of the crocodile in front of them and demands they lead him to their boss. The scene shifts to Yong-gu's faction headquarters, where Aiden has already thrown 2 of the faction's leaders to the ground with a single punch. The extras murmur, complaining and calling each other traitors for bringing an enemy to their base. One extra thinks that even if their boss wins, they are in trouble because they're being labeled as traitors. Impatient, Aiden calls out their boss to fight like a man, and he appears. Kim is surprised to see the man is even larger than Aiden. The boss then asks his lackeys who is causing all the noise, and the showdown between Aiden and Jian, the faction leader, begins. Aiden asks if he is the head here, and John calls him a brat, asking why he's so silent, wondering if he bit his tongue off. Aiden, however, mocks whether being old is something to boast about, and is about to comment on John's extortion practices when John lands a blow on Aiden's chin. John taunts Aiden, calling him a kid, and stating that one should never speak carelessly in this world. Aiden, with a frighteningly calm face, hasn't budged an inch, having blocked the punch. Agreeing with Jian, Aiden says that in this world, the one with the strongest fist is the adult. John, smirking, acknowledges that Aiden blocked the punch and proposes that if Aiden loses, he should become his subordinate, offering him the position of second in command. Aiden agrees, but counters that if he wins, he'll take the extras with him. Excited, Aiden throws a punch to the boss's stomach, but it seems to have little effect, surprising Kim and the extras, who explain that their boss consumed 12 status stones, most of which enhanced his strength, giving him skin akin to ogre hide. Though the punch didn't seem effective, Aiden doesn't care and starts attacking furiously and relentlessly, breaking through the boss's defenses, whose skin is supposedly as tough as ogre hide. John takes a breather and remarks that even a brat like Aiden is making him itch. Furious, they exchange blows again, but Aiden's punches are now breaking John's fingers and nails. A status window appears for Aiden, indicating ogre skin and giant skin, which grants an epidermis tougher than steel when struck. Aiden's skin turns slightly green, and John realizes that Aiden possesses genuine ogre skin. Aiden grabs John by the neck, telling him to grit his teeth so he doesn't bite his tongue, preparing another punch. The extras around them think about helping their boss, who is losing the fight, but the black-haired extra blocks their path, stating that this is a fair fight so no one should interfere. Clenching his fists, he threatens to handle anyone who tries to intervene. Another extra in front of him calls him trash, reminding him of his loyalty oath to the Dragon Turtle faction, and asks if this is betrayal. The black-haired extra replies, "I simply swear loyalty to the strongest," deciding that if he is to be called a traitor, he'll go all in. Aiden lands a punch on the boss's face, who falls to the ground with a few broken teeth. While on the ground, the boss asks for help, but Aiden jumps on him and, before he can strike again, the boss faints, leaving Aiden disappointed, thinking he had finally found someone interesting. With a smile, he remarks that a boss begging for help is pathetic. The scene cuts to a pile of item bags they took from the Dragon Turtle faction. As they prepare to leave, the boss asks Aiden a question. Aiden tells him to speak, and the old man, missing a tooth, says he has never seen Aiden around before, asking which organization he belongs to. Aiden, perplexed, says he's just a second-year high school student. The scene changes again to the extras setting up a tent. One of them thanks Aiden for taking them in, and Aiden replies that he hopes they do well from now on. He is excited to have his first subordinates, though he acknowledges that he's still weak and that the path of a barbarian strengthens with battles. He regrets hesitating for a moment against the old man, thinking his father would surely have been disappointed, and internally reprimands himself for not taking the guy's head. Aiden then calls Kim Commander and asks if he gave instructions to the guys. Kim, surprised and feeling proud, says he ordered them to set up the tent, but Aiden tells him he doesn't have time and orders them to move on. Kim asks where they're going, and Aiden replies that he's found his next destination. Adjusting his glasses, Kim mentions that there's something up ahead, while Aiden states that his instincts tell him they will grow stronger if they go beyond it. The scene shows a giant pyramid ahead of them, marking their new goal. The next morning, all the protagonist's new henchmen are standing in front of him. He praises their excellent work after they set up the tent, and announces they will now cross the river. This leaves the dark-haired extra surprised, as he realizes the protagonist is already trying to conquer the continent that no one has ever dared to. He asks when they'll return, and the protagonist replies he has no plans of returning, perhaps only when they decide to return to Earth. The henchman then says they need to go back in 4 days because the portal in this world opens every 5 days, and today is the first day it's open. 1 day on Earth is equal to 5 days here. Kim, surprised, realizes there's a cycle for the portal's opening, finding it ridiculous to stay in this barbaric world all the time. The protagonist, showing a serious expression, says they'll return in 3 days. Then, he considers that next time they return to the portal, he should bring his grandfather, as he can protect him there. On Earth, it's post-apocalyptic. Pointing at his henchman, he states this is quite useful information and asks for his name. The extra responds that he's Jong-do, and pointing at him, the protagonist declares that from now on, he will be number 1. Jong, confused, tries to clarify that his name is Jong, but the protagonist interrupts, asserting that from now on, he'll refer to them as numbers from 1 to 5. A surprised girl asks if he's kidding, stating that she has a name. The protagonist, now furious, demands to know if they have any issues with his decision. They quickly shout that they don't, bowing to wish for a safe journey, and the protagonist and Kim head toward the river. On a raft, Kim asks if the protagonist built it alone. The system notifies him that he gained experience for building a raft, surprising him for earning production experience. Growing impatient while rowing, he grabs a rope, ties himself to the raft, and, leaving Kim in shock, jumps into the water, declaring that rowing is too slow. He begins to move rapidly, almost turning the raft into a speedboat. Watching this, Kim starts to reflect on how quickly the protagonist adapts, whereas he doesn't as much. But he remembers the protagonist calling him Commander, which motivates him, pushing Kim to give his best for improvement. They cross the river and face a large pyramid. The system reveals the Pyramid Sanctuary, with activation bonuses for contributing to the sanctuary. They need 2,000 coins for activation. The protagonist takes the lead and instructs them to collect the coins, but Kim, gritting his teeth, shouts for the protagonist to wait and suggests they each gather coins separately. Surprised, the protagonist asks why. Kim explains that with the world-ending crisis, it seems like he's never done things on his own. So this time, he wants to try doing it himself without the protagonist's help. They split up, and soon after, the protagonist starts slaying animals with his bare hands, punching them wildly. He shouts, questioning what kind of monster this is, as he's never seen anything like it before, and he grins madly, declaring it fun. While finishing off another ostrich, one attacks him from behind, but he notices, grabs it by the neck, and slams it to the ground, killing it instantly. The ones he previously killed turn into coins and orbs, and one of them drops a pink orb. Surprised, he checks in the system to see what type of orb it is, learning that it's a throwing ability stone, which grants magical power to throw items with greater strength and speed. Gripping the orb in his hand, he acknowledges he's gained a new ability. He then worries about Kim. Could he be all right? We see Kim facing the dinosaur-like ostrich that the protagonist has fought so often. Confident, Kim taunts the creature, shouting insults at it, and, by instinct, the creature charges at him. Kim has tied a rope to a tree, which he wraps around the animal's neck, creating an opening, and with a bone knife, he strikes the animal's head, killing it with a blow to the head. Exhausted after killing his first monster alone, he thinks the protagonist must have hunted dozens of these by himself. Feeling proud, he recalls making a bone knife from a crocodile bone earlier. With this knife, he feels capable of hunting on his own and believes he can improve through production methods. Lost in thought, he hears a growl behind him. A large orc stands there, growling. Looking back, he sees the orc preparing to strike with a club. Kim leaps to dodge, realizing he's in serious trouble. This orc may be as strong as the protagonist, and he fears it may be the end. The orc prepares to attack again, but before he can finish, something hits his face, causing him to stagger. He tries to stay upright but collapses, knocked out. Kim, shocked, shouts to ask who did this. The protagonist, behind a deformed bush, yells that it was him, number 2, having used his new ability to launch items with magical power for more strength and speed. Later, sitting by a campfire with a pile of ostrich meat, the protagonist admits he was worried about Kim, but is glad he's here. Calmly, Kim says he could handle the ostriches alone, though perhaps not the orcs, and admits dejectedly that he's never done anything alone. The protagonist, offering him a piece of meat, tells him not to be discouraged and not to feel ashamed just because he's weak now. With training, he'll become a great fighter. Surprised, Kim wonders if this is really the same protagonist he knows, reflecting on how much he's grown since they arrived here. Eating happily, the protagonist seriously tells Kim, "You already know I'm a barbarian. I'm different from a regular human." Kim, surprised, seems unaware and asks what he means. The protagonist, mouthful, asks if he truly didn't know and reaffirms he's a barbarian. Kim, with a spontaneous expression of surprise, repeats, "A barbarian? Are you from some savage nation?" Thinking more deeply, Kim recalls the feats the protagonist has accomplished, which no human could do. The protagonist asks if Kim really didn't know, and Kim stands up, affirming he didn't. How could he have known? The protagonist realizes and says he understands. Kim explains he was so surprised that he felt confused. The protagonist reassures Kim that there's no need to compare himself to him because they are different. Back in front of the pyramid, they place their hands on it now that they've gathered the required coins. The system announces that initial activation rewards are being distributed and their inventories being updated. Smiling broadly, Kim says, "Activating this is amazing." He then wonders aloud what a subspace is. The protagonist, crossing his arms, comments that the rewards must vary depending on the number of coins collected. Another buff notification appears, doubling recovery rates for 24 hours, leaving Kim surprised by the recovery buff. Soon, he feels his fatigue alleviated, so he thinks that with these advantages, he might get stronger. He realizes he might be able to stop relying on the protagonist now, and it's time for him to grow. As they talk, a few orcs arrive while the one who was knocked out speaks in the orcish language, saying they were the ones who attacked him. Alongside him, two stronger orcs show up. Kim, quickly frightened, leaves all his thoughts behind, clings to the protagonist for help, and is visibly terrified. The protagonist pushes him away, asking what's wrong, and says that since Kim now has advantages, he should fight too. Kim is taken aback, but the protagonist, smiling, tells him not to be afraid because he has a barbarian on his side. He gets into a fighting stance, with a reddish aura emanating from his body, smiling with excitement. He then tells Kim to take care of the previous orc while he handles the other newcomers. The protagonist charges toward them first, and Kim, surprised, shouts, saying they were supposed to fight together. One of the orcs tries to thrust a spear at the protagonist, but he dodges, grabbing the spear by the handle. With his tremendous strength, he lifts the orc with just the handle and slams him to the ground, making the orc fall face first. Stepping on the orc, the protagonist says, "How dare you use a weapon against someone unarmed?" Another orc takes advantage of the moment to attack the protagonist from behind with a club, but before he can make contact, Kim throws himself against the orc, making him step back and drawing his attention. In a fighting stance, he shouts, "Come on, you primitive orc!" But the orc quickly lands a blow on Kim's stomach and begins to unleash a series of attacks. Kim is barely protecting his head, but is still hit by the attacks, feeling like he's dying with each blow. He falls to his knees, spitting blood, and his body starts glowing green, activating the sanctuary's blessing, which doubles his recovery rate. With a slight smile and newfound confidence, he thinks that at least the blessing helps him recover quickly. Determined, he says, "It's time for another round." The orc launches another attack at Kim, but this time he dodges, realizing he can't give up just because he's scared. He thinks he has to be a friend worthy of a barbarian. Full of confidence, he's hit squarely in the face by the orc, sending him flying, glasses and all, into a nearby tree. Thinking he let his guard down by relying too much on the blessing, he starts to understand this opponent's attack patterns. With blood streaming from his nose, he confidently charges at the orc again, shouting, "It's my turn to attack now!" The orc, preparing an attack with both hands, prompts Kim to think. That's right, he's starting with a downward strike. The orc attacks, and Kim dodges to the orc's left. In the opening left by the heavy attack, he strikes the orc's chin with a knife, landing a critical hit. The orc falls to his knees and collapses, dead. Overjoyed, Kim dances, celebrating his success in defeating an orc. Holding a spear, the protagonist commends him, saying he did a good job. Exhausted, Kim sits down, saying, "I think I'm starting to get the hang of fighting. By the way, you're amazing too, taking on orcs armed with spears while unarmed." As the protagonist holds one of the orc's spears, the system announces he has gained a deep understanding of spear techniques, unlocking the spear mastery skill. Smiling as he looks at the spear, the protagonist comments that fighting with a stolen spear is no wonder he unlocked spear mastery. Kim asks if he's serious about unlocking that mastery, and the protagonist responds that it's like how he gained the creation skill when he successfully crafted a fishing rod. The protagonist explains that using weapons this way allows one to learn new skills. Looking at Kim, he asks if he's fully recovered. Nervously sweating, Kim asks, "Why?" "Don't tell me you're looking for another fight." The protagonist, pointing to the ground, tells him to look in that direction, a trail of footprints. If they follow them, they'll find where the orcs live. Meanwhile, a group of camouflaged extras are watching an orc lumberjack village from afar. As they observe, a hand the size of one of their heads taps one of their shoulders, and they jump in fright, letting out a small yelp. But the protagonist appears, signaling for them to be quiet. Calming down, they ask if it's Chioldu. The extras are military personnel. The protagonist asks what they're doing there, saying he didn't recognize them at first. One soldier explains that when in enemy territory, they must camouflage. He notes that if the orcs caught them, it would be hard to make it out in one piece. He advises the protagonist to leave quickly, saying it's dangerous even for him, especially with the orc chief, a heavily armored orc with a massive axe. The soldier says it would take an entire company to deal with such a monster. But the protagonist, licking his lips with excitement, says, "A monster, you say? Seems like he has a fine weapon." With determination, he declares that the orc chief's axe will be his. They advance toward the orcs, leaving the soldiers in shock. Some time passes, and inside the orc village, after slaying many orcs, the protagonist stands before the orc chief, removing his shirt in preparation. He declares that this fight is his alone, snapping his fingers with excitement. He attempts to speak in Orcish, surprising Kim. The protagonist thinks that the orc chief keeps repeating this phrase, so he's trying to improvise. However, the orc appears to interpret it as an insult, growing more furious. He attacks the protagonist with his huge axe, which the protagonist easily dodges, thinking that with that armor, he won't be able to handle this bare-handed. When the orc attacks again, the protagonist realizes that if he gets hit full-on by that axe, his ogre-like skin won't hold up. With a dark expression, he decides to grab the orc's axe and wrest it from him. Using only brute strength, he lifts the orc into the air and slams him to the ground. Taking up the axe, he strikes the orc's head as it lies on the ground, smashing it with such force that he crushes its head. The system announces that his understanding of axe techniques has deepened, and he has learned the axe proficiency skill. The soldiers, utterly astounded, look at the protagonist, questioning if he's crazy for taking on the orc chief alone. Kim, less surprised, remarks that it's expected of Cheoldu. He defeated the chief. Another soldier, still in disbelief, thinks the protagonist is truly incredible, more than a person, more like a monster. With a blood-soaked axe on his shoulder and his body covered in orc blood, he smiles at them, asking, "Now, who's the real monster here?" One of the soldiers thinks to himself that a monster like him shouldn't be free. We see the army headquarters. A military woman named Kang Mi Ran, the colonel, is reading an investigation report. She says, "Kang Cheoldu defeated the field chief, Ogre Jr., alone in the test, and then he wiped out the Turtle Dragon faction and a horde of orcs in Nova?" The soldier shouts, "Yes!" The colonel asks why such a great talent hasn't been identified until now. The soldier comments that it's probably due to his age. He isn't old enough to enlist yet. Surprised at the mention of his age, she quickly returns to the file, which states he's a senior in high school. She closes the report and says she understands the situation, instructing the soldier to send a recruitment notification to enlist him early. The soldier affirms it won't be easy, remarking that Cheoldu doesn't seem like the type to follow orders. The colonel grows apprehensive, realizing how much they need someone like him in the army. While considering an alternative way to recruit him, someone shouts from behind the door, "Sub-Officer Osi, reporting, Colonel." Hearing this, she deems it perfect timing and decides he'll handle the task. She calls him in. Upon entering, the sub-officer asks if she's planning to send the defense personnel team. The colonel, now serious, confirms they are all facing an apocalyptic crisis, and if Cheoldu doesn't come willingly, they'll have to bring him by force. Meanwhile, we see another sub-officer declaring that they're acting under orders. The scene shifts to the protagonist and his lackeys. The one with black hair says Cheoldu is practically the hero of Cheongju Nova. The protagonist comments that it's been a while since he returned to Earth, adding that it feels good to be back. They chat among themselves until a female soldier approaches and asks which of them is Cheoldu. The second lieutenant announces she has a proposal from the army. The protagonist asks what the proposal is, while one of his friends finds her very attractive but keeps it to himself. The lieutenant begins explaining that she's heard about his impressive feats in Nova, and that's why she's there. However, the protagonist ignores her and calls Jintai to leave. Refusing to accept this, she yells for him to wait. Disbelieving that she's been completely ignored, she adds that she's there to offer him a commission as an army officer. Jintai is surprised, noting they're offering him an officer position rather than a sub-officer role. The protagonist, however, says he isn't interested. Furious, the lieutenant doesn't say anything. Another officer appears, placing a hand on her shoulder to calm her down. He remarks that he warned her someone like Cheoldu wouldn't come easily. He then calls the protagonist an uneducated high school kid and suddenly kicks him while he's off guard. The protagonist blocks the kick with his forearm, smiling. The officer asks if maybe now he's ready to talk, and immediately strikes again with a kick to the stomach, throwing the protagonist back. Childu recognizes the officer as strong and fast. Still smiling, the officer declares that Childu's antics won't work here. He is still a small fish in Nova Seoul. The protagonist is confused by the mention of Nova Seoul while clutching his stomach in pain. The officer warns him to accept the sacred duty of military service, adding that if he enlists under his command, he'll help him grow stronger. Feeling a rush of excitement, Childu thinks about how, as expected, all the strong ones are in Nova. Facing an opponent of this level, he acknowledges he would have lost for sure if he hadn't grown stronger in Nova. The officer asks if he's ready to enlist now, but the protagonist stands up and comments that the officer seems to be someone important in Nova. He then declares that he'll give it his all, but if he wins, he won't enlist. Like a true furious berserker, he charges at the officer. The officer steadies his stance, smiling, and challenges him to bring it on, warning that he might regret it later. Like a monster, the protagonist starts unleashing powerful punches against the officer's defense. After blocking several blows, the officer notices his arms turning completely bruised and painful. While he wonders where he suddenly got such strength, the protagonist, like a tireless madman, keeps punching the officer's defense. The officer, stepping back, his arms aching and exhausted, ponders, thinking he'd heard that this man had only been to Nova once. So who the hell is he? He wonders. Observing the protagonist's fighting stance, the officer sees no openings for a counterattack. Still, his pride drives him forward. After the protagonist throws a punch that the officer narrowly dodges, he attempts to land his first strike, convinced it's impossible for him to lose. But the protagonist counters with a knee strike, hitting the officer's torso and throwing him backward, breaking his nose. The officer's subordinates celebrate his crushing victory. The lieutenant rushes to aid the officer, who is writhing in pain. Cracking his knuckles, the protagonist remarks that it was a decent fight. The officer can only groan in agony. The protagonist turns and says they will meet again somewhere in Nova. The sub-officer, clutching his face and seemingly crying, is asked by the lieutenant if he is shedding tears. Removing his hand from his face, he begins to laugh, saying, "This act is getting too embarrassing to keep up." As the lieutenant helps him walk away, he vows to remember the name Kang Cheoldu. At the protagonist's home, his grandfather asks, "Is it really true? Is the world really going to end as you said?" With his mouth full, the protagonist tells his grandfather not to worry. Eyeing the orc chief's axe, the grandfather admits it's hard not to believe. The protagonist then urges his grandfather to come to Nova with him. However, the grandfather thanks him and says he's glad the protagonist has found his path, but he intends to stay there until the end. The protagonist, curious, asks why he refuses to stay in Nova. After taking a swig, the old man responds by asking the protagonist how much time he thinks he has left. "Adapting to a new place isn't easy for an old man like me," he says. The protagonist, apprehensive, acknowledges that it's true. A dangerous and wild world like Nova would be too much for his grandfather, and the test to enter Nova would be overwhelming. He resolves to return for his grandfather once he's stronger. Sharing this plan, he asks his grandfather to promise that he'll come with him later. Suddenly, the grandfather hears someone approaching, and the protagonist, still eating, says they've already arrived. Shortly after, alongside Jin-tae, the protagonist asks about what he's discovered regarding Nova. Jin-tae explains that all information about Nova seems to have been disguised as a matter of national emergency. The protagonist speculates that the authorities are trying to prevent chaos by blocking the media, calling it a perfect scenario for those with information to get ahead. Jin-tae, impressed by this rare moment of insight, recalls what the soldier they fought had said about Nova Seoul. Apparently, Cheongju wasn't the only place where Nova portals were opening. Portals to different regions in Nova were appearing across various areas. Those in government and corporations who knew about it first had already begun developing Nova, with Nova Seoul, accessible through the Paju portal, being the most notable. It was a government-led area, with the portal having opened 2 years ago. Shocked by the portal's 2-year existence, the protagonist remarks that this equates to 10 years in Nova time, implying that powerful enemies must reside there. Jinte agrees, adding that Nova Seoul is better for growth because of the challenges. However, rewards from first activations in new areas like Cheongju Nova are probably no longer available. The protagonist declares that staying on a new continent was fun, but would only leave them lagging behind. If Nova Seoul is a more advanced civilization, they should find better quality equipment there. Jinte is impressed by the protagonist's logic. The protagonist stands and suggests leaving soon, but Jinte mentions that his car was confiscated. With a smirk, the protagonist says, "There's always a way." We then see them hitching a ride with one of the protagonist's subordinates. The black-haired subordinate says, Nova Seoul was a good choice. The protagonist asks if they really want to follow him. The subordinate says they'd love to follow their boss, but need to settle some loose ends regarding the Turtle Dragon faction. The protagonist acknowledges this and tells them to handle things on their end, saying they'll meet again. The blonde subordinate asks if he'll be all right since the place is managed by the army. The soldier he knocked out last time seemed to be of high rank. Smirking, the protagonist confidently states that if anyone threatens them, they'll simply take them down. She calls him tough. After a long journey, as night falls, Jinte looks out the window and says they've finally arrived. Before them is the massive Paju portal, also known as Nova Seoul. Jinte asks what the protagonist thinks of Nova Seoul, to which he replies that he doesn't care as long as they can grow stronger. Upon crossing the portal, Jinte remarks that even though it's Nova Seoul, only about 10 years have passed, but the place is already on par with the Joseon dynasty, a staggering development. Protagonist can hardly believe it. Suddenly, they hear a woman screams. She's been robbed, and the thief, by bad luck, is running straight toward the protagonist. Spotting the thief, the protagonist says it seems even here, corruption exists. The thief, realizing he can't escape, readies his katana to strike. However, the protagonist grabs the thief by the face with his massive hand and slams him into the ground, embedding his head. Declaring his intent to dominate Nova Seoul, the protagonist turns to the woman, who offers them a meal in gratitude. At the table, the woman serves food to the duo. Jinte praises the meal, asking if it's real rice soup. The woman expresses gratitude, saying she'd have lost an entire month's salary if it weren't for them. Holding a bowl that looks like a small pot in his large hands, the protagonist says he'll enjoy the meal. While Jinte relishes the rice soup, he recalls the time he ate poorly cooked alligator meat, but in the brief moment he's lost in the past, the protagonist has already devoured over 10 bowls of soup. Stunned, Jinte watches as the woman, smiling, brings 2 more bowls and says they can eat for free today. With a bone in his mouth, the protagonist says he only did what anyone would do, adding that if anyone bothers her again, she can call him anytime. He then resumes eating voraciously. Watching him eat, the woman says she feels full just looking at him. She mentions that despite the soldiers guarding the village, there are still many looters. Jinte asks if that means it happens often. Disheartened, she confirms it, explaining that since Nova Seoul's population exploded, as missions became scarce, which soon made the strong attack the weak, turning this place into chaos. With a smile, the protagonist says that this is good, because soon the bandits here will become his prey. The lady, with irony, says that if it were that easy, even so, you must be careful and always use your evaluation when fighting. Curious, the protagonist asks what evaluation is. With a disbelieving expression, she says he seems new around here then. The skill evaluation is essential, she explains. You acquire it by capturing a royal owl in the hunting fields. It allows you to roughly assess the abilities of others as well. Jinte, enthusiastic, says they can then see how much they've grown too. Incredible! The protagonist gets up and tells them to start moving. The lady asks if they're really going like that with nothing. If they're going to hunt, they must equip themselves first. After putting on some leather armor with good durability, they head to the blacksmith the lady recommended to get weapons. Upon arriving at the Dragon Tiger workshop, Jinte says he's heard there's an incredible artisan there. He wonders what he might look like. Behind them, an old man appears with a bottle of soju in one hand and a hammer in the other. The man asks what they want. The protagonist says they want weapons. Jintei covers his nose, bothered by the strong smell of alcohol coming from the man. The master craftsman says there's nothing there and, passing between them, tells them to leave. Jintei asks about custom orders. He heard this blacksmith could make any type of weapon. The old craftsman starts with a chuckle, saying they seem like naive nobles. The blacksmiths of Nova Seoul closed their doors a long time ago. The protagonist asks why. The old man explains that these days, finding iron is harder than finding gold. The Obongsan iron mine was taken over by bandits. Interested, the protagonist asks if they're just ordinary bandits. The old man says they are, but they're on a completely different level from common ones. Nova Seoul has 3 powerful figures known as the Three Hands, and one of them is Jang Ho-cheol, the bandit of Obongsan. They aren't just thieves, they're murderers as well. Truly a terrifying group. Bandit Jang Ho-cheol is a special target with charges of murder and theft and a bounty of 100,000 juha issued by the Republic of Nova Seoul. They have so many henchmen that even the army struggles to handle them. If a war breaks out, Nova Seoul will suffer greatly. The protagonist, finding it interesting, says it's truly intriguing. He then asks, if they manage to take care of Jang Ho-cheol, will you make weapons for us? After grabbing and brandishing his axe, the craftsman sees it, and, excited, says, wait, the great axe of the orc chief? Where did you get such a rare item? The protagonist doesn't answer, but the craftsman says, of course. If he could return to the forge, he'd make any weapon they wanted. However, he wonders aloud if they're seriously planning to face those guys. Smiling, the protagonist tells him to get real. After we eliminate the Obongsan bandits, I'll come back to order the best weapon you can make. They head towards the mines in the forest. Jintei comments that the protagonist already has that huge axe, so why would he need another weapon? The protagonist explains that the more diversified the arsenal, the better. Different prey demands different fighting styles. It's all about being prepared. Jintei says he understands, but asks if they can really hunt around there. The place is crowded, full of people, and at this rate they won't find any owls, let alone other prey. How are we supposed to level up? Things were better at the Cheongju portal. The protagonist tells him to wait a little, picks up a stone from the ground, and throws it towards the forest, hitting a royal owl and killing it. Jintei asks how he knew where it was, and the protagonist says he felt it wasn't an animal. Jintei asks what he's waiting for and tells him to quickly learn the skill. He then picks up the skill stone, which allows him to observe and analyze the target to produce results. The observable range increases based on the amount of information. With this, he can now see their information. Soon, we see Gangcheoldu, race, barbarian, characteristics, barbarian's heart, fairy blessing, ogre skin, abilities, throwing, seeking, techniques, spear art, axe art. He says it shows the characteristics and abilities he has, but he notices the fairy's blessing and finds it strange. For him, a barbarian receiving a blessing from the fairies, supposedly their enemies, is unusual. He begins to think about the past, but Jintei interrupts him, saying to verify it. However, the protagonist says there's nothing and adds that he thinks Jintei needs to work harder. Not far from them, hidden among the trees, they are being watched by Sergeant Ki Yong-soo and Captain Choi Jun-seop. The captain's face is bleeding after being grazed by the stone the protagonist threw. The captain is surprised that they were attacked from such a distance, even while hidden. The sergeant asks if he's okay, noticing the blood on his face. The captain thinks that if the angle hadn't shifted midway, it could have been fatal. He wonders if they might have noticed their presence. The captain remarks that since Ojin Wee has been exposed, this is not a common situation. We must recruit them at all costs, he says. The sergeant mentions the direction they're heading, and the captain, in disbelief, says they're heading toward Mount Obong. This is bad if they go there. The scene shifts to Jintei, who asks the protagonist if he's sure this is the bandits' territory. Hidden in the bushes, one of the bandits remarks how bold they are to invade their territory. He notes they seem to be carrying a lot, especially that axe with him. Another bandit, with a rougher and more pronounced voice, calls the protagonist and Jintai stupid fools offering themselves as prey. He mocks their courage for invading their territory. He is Jang Ho Cheol, the leader of the bandits, characterized by his 3 fingers.